We speak for the trees have no tongues. I'm Nick,
I'm Luke.
and we have with us today, Adela's actually not going to be weighing in too much on this one. We have as a guest today, Eric from the Northwoods. He's both a fan of the Northwoods and defender of the loons in Wisconsin. It's his given life goal, and he's going to be joining us. This is going to be a little bit more of a serious podcast. We're going to be talking about essentially sustainable and alternative agriculture programs, how they affect ecosystems, and how they affect apex predators. So, Eric, if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself, or perhaps your academic, pathway that you're going on right now.
Well, I am Erick Lopez, as was previously stated. I go to UW Stevens Point, and I'm focusing my studies on urban forestry. Uh,
Urban
yeah.
forestry. So,
Urban
I mean, I'm an environmental studies student myself, and we obviously talk a little bit about forestry in terms of things, basic concepts like sustainable yield, which is the amount of a particular material that you can take out of an ecosystem while it's able to regenerate itself in a usable time span. But how would you say that urban agriculture urban forestry differs in comparison to maybe more general ideas about forestry?
well, the big thing is that we're not so much working around the forest, is that we're working around the people and trying to bring sort of the benefits that the forest and the forest ecosystem offer there to the people of like a suburb or a city. I mean, some of the big things like that we have on campus is we've got a row of they call it an edible garden, but it's just a couple of like apple trees and like um, little plum, like Newport plums. They're small, but you can still eat the fruit. They're not that tasty, but more so the apples, the crab apples and stuff like that. So it's kind of just utilizing different things that the animals and we use when we go, if you're picking berries or something, and just kind of bringing them literally into the cities.
Right. So it sounds to me a little bit like permaculture or like edible sorry, excuse me, edible landscapes. Yeah. Would you say that that's kind of the same concept, or is it more just like incorporating green space in general in suburbs?
I think the big thing would mostly be just incorporating the green space, because we've all been to the city, big city Chicago, just right down the road,
Yeah.
and it's all concrete and it's all
Mhm.
glass, and architecture. It's beautiful architecture, but
Mhm.
there's not that many, spots of green as opposed to like the little parks that you
Yeah.
can go to and walk around. But a lot of people don't get to see, like big tall pine trees or big oak trees or maple
Mhm.
trees anymore. And I mean, maybe it's not a necessity as, like food or water, but it's definitely a sight for the eyes, and it's all around you, and it's something that we could use, be it like urban timber or just a place to sit
Mhm.
down, get away from the
Yeah.
sun. So,
When I went to Stockholm in Norway, I think it was Stockholm that I was in. Like they had like a three square mile park or something, and it was all just wooded area. You don't find that in Chicago. You
yeah.
won't find that in Chicago.
No, I mean and you've got like Central Park in New York, but
It's still
that's the exception, I would say, rather than the rule still.
and even then it's so like touristy.
Yeah.
It's not a place as much that you just go there, hang out, and like as much and exercise and everything.
So, in your urban forestry degree, do you go into it all, like the public administration aspect of like zoning and actually incorporating green space into, I guess, urban or suburban space?
Yeah, definitely. We've got a bunch of classes, both on, like, there's just your general arboriculture classes. There's land use planning, which goes into um, more of designing the landscape and whatnot. And then you've got your public relations classes, your resource economics classes, um, and then they even make you take, environmental ethics. So, like, even though you're not in a forest environment, you're in the urban forest environment, and there's still like precautions that you have to think about, be it like, squirrels and stuff like that, or, something bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting, because I've often wondered whether or not, like, when I know a lot of times private companies will buy up large areas of land and they can get government subsidies for turning it back to, say, wetland or like prairie. But I wonder if for urban forestry, if it's like an economic motivation, or if it's do you like do you think it's a lot of valuation based on this also helps improve like biodiversity and like the ecosystem health and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a big mixture of all of those things. Because like we've seen in like huge cities and stuff, like you don't need trees or turf grass, and you'll still be in an okay, like livable environment because of everything else going around on our planet. But like I said before, part of the urban forestry thing is, we just like to look at these things. Like, they look nice. Like, there's something, no matter where you're from, where if you see, like, a big, beautiful, like, old, mature tree,
Yeah.
There's just something about it that you're like, wow, like, this thing is alive.
Yeah.
And this thing is, sequestering atmospheric nutrients and transforming the soil under you so that if you did want to put a community garden next to this big tree, like if you do it the right way and you plan your stuff the right way, like you can plant, a nice big, like, I'm not going to say black walnut because that's not the best example, but you
Right,
could
yeah.
plant, some big like legume, or like red alder is really good at like pulling in atmospheric nitrogen using microfrankia. It's like a little, I'm not sure if I think it's a fungus or a bacteria, one or the two, but they pull in nitrogen just like the legume family does. So, there's a bunch of different things you could do with it. Urban wood is a big thing that's going on now. It's like, because, a lot of neighborhoods with like Dutch elm disease back in the day and emerald ash borer, and all these trees are getting cut down, and either they're just chipped or they're tossed in a field and burned or chucked in a lake just to get rid of the space, like they did back in the day.
Yeah.
But now you can take it, and if you're pruning and planting, you can turn that wood into usable and like scalable lumber, be it to build garden beds out of trees that you cut down in the neighborhood. And or like a company, I was just telling Adela, a company over in the southeast Wisconsin area, they have a urban wood utilization lab that they turn into furniture, and it's like veneer quality wood, and they get paid through every step of the process, and everybody kind of benefits from it.
Well, and the great thing about what that sounds like too is that you're also just reducing the amount of virgin wood that you're cutting as well. I mean, it's like salvage wood almost. So you're limiting the amount of basically area that we're doing timber harvest in, like managed federal land. Because a lot of people may not know this, but a very vast majority of what's called the public land in the United States is federally owned or state owned, and it's what's called mixed use or multiple use land, meaning that it's reserved for recreation. It's reserved for private companies to come in and do timber harvesting contracts. It can be reserved for camping, for sustaining wildlife, and a lot of that land is very important because it's. I mean, most of the United States, especially the Midwest and especially the Western United States, is pretty much been completely converted into like mass scale agriculture. And the problem with that is when you have so many of the same plant in such a large area, it doesn't really provide any usable energy or material for animals and other plants in the ecosystem. When you have a forest, there's a lot of different processes going on, like you were talking about with the trees that pull in nitrogen from the air, the red alder. There's a lot of different processes that have to be going on, you know, physical ones and biological ones, in order for an ecosystem or, you know, even just a park to be healthy and able to support a wide range of
life.
yeah, a wide range of different kinds of life, especially, and
like even like bacteria.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool that this urban forestry, they're trying to incorporate kind of like, almost, it sounds almost like closed loop, not agriculture, but closed loop, like a closed loop waste system, where all the material that would normally be like waste material is being reused in its own setting, which is really cool.
And on a realistic scale, and kind of like what they're teaching us, like our professors and stuff, they're the ones who were taught all the stuff we know now is really bad, and like we shouldn't be doing. Like they used to tell people that when you're removing large limbs from a tree per se, they wanted you to cut into the bark inclusion, like if it's a really narrow angle where it's going to be bark and branch tissue. And they used to say, yeah, just cut right through that, and it's okay if a little bark tissue is cut off, it'll be fine. But, you know, now we know that dramatically increases the amount of decay causing fungus that can get into there and eventually will rot out that section of the tree. And so they're teaching us now everything that they learned in their studies to correct the old ways, and it's proper pruning. And, you know, like you were saying, it can be that closed loop system for everything. You know, you can make the beds and pull the soil from a park all around you, and you can use the old, you know, grass clippings as compost for your trees, for, you know, the next rotation of plants that come in. So it can be that closed loop system. It's just you've got to have the educated people that understand how the system works to be able to kind of pull it all in together.
Yeah, no, definitely. And for people who are listening, one of the main things, like we were saying earlier, that we want to kind of tie into this is the effect of apex predators on ecosystems. And the main cause of extinction and, you know, extirpation, which is the removal of a species from one area, is habitat loss. And that's the main cause of habitat loss is from agriculture. And what Eric is talking about, and what Luke and I are going to be talking about, is basically ways to incorporate things like alternative agriculture and urban forestry in order to reduce the amount of habitat that is being lost, and so that predator species can kind of, you know, increase their numbers again. And Luke, I know that you wanted to talk about vertical farming as your main area of interest.
Yeah. Alright, so, I mean, my idea, for agriculture, I think that the best use would be to do alternative agriculture, such as, like, sustainable farming, and having that biodiversity within the farm, and, like, having, like, chickens go over and eat it, all the bugs and everything. But so my solution for apex predator loss would be to start vertical farming within urban areas, especially urban areas, but also suburban areas. Probably not rural areas, but at least start in the cities and having vertical farms within the cities that would, like, you could put them within skyscrapers, build your own skyscraper, or just even like a 2-story building. You know, it doesn't need to be a skyscraper, but there is one in Newark, which is, I forget how many stories that is, but it's a pretty large vertical farm.
So do you want to explain basically like the idea of vertical farming though?
So vertical farming is pretty much just indoor hydro or aeroponics, and that's using either nutrients to feed the plants with just minimal water, that's aeroponics, and hydroponics is having them suspended in water with the nutrients being dispersed, is the gist of it. And so basically, using that system, we would have local agriculture within our cities, specifically starting them in food deserts that are in the cities to fight the food justice issues for that. So it's like helping a lot of people at the same time. But then it also would help with not having to transport food millions of miles, and then having people actually able to eat nutrient-dense foods instead of processed foods. And yeah, so that would help with that. But basically, I would want to start a program that would also buy back, either this could be private or government, but with our current political climate, it'd be very hard to get the government to jump on board this. But so it'd probably have to start from the private sector and start conservation of land by buying old farmland there's some that is just completely unusable because of the way that we've treated it over the years, or very minimally usable, and start buying that back and turn that into conservation areas to first just start with growing back like prairies or whatever is indigenous to that area, and then introducing the apex predator and every other animal biodiversity that used to be there. And I don't think we're ready for this as a society, like I don't think that our tastes and preferences tend to focus on being healthy except for in certain areas, I think that if we could make vertical farming cheap and localized, it'd be easier to convince people to start eating healthy and create demand for it, especially in the areas where they need it, because they have so many like health problems through eating junk food all the time that would be at least helped by it, and I think it'd be very easy to convince them if we can provide it in a local and low cost, and yeah.
Yeah, and that sounds the key benefits of vertical agriculture sound a lot like community gardens and food hubs, which is what my main focus is in. A community garden is essentially a garden that generally grows produce. It could grow flowers or native plants as well, but generally it's a garden that grows produce, and that produce is either available to the community with no cost, or it's donated to places like food hubs and food pantries. And kind of like vertical farming, some of the main benefits of it are, first of all, you're doing a lot better land management practices, so you don't have the same kinds of problems and this is nothing against them, nothing against farmers, but they're in a system where in order to grow all the food that we need to feed the country on an industrialized scale, they have to use pesticides, they have to use fertilizer, and they apply it in such generous amounts that most of it's not actually utilized by the crops, and it just runs off in rainwater and erosion.
That reminds me of another point that I wanted to make.
Okay.
So, you can finish.
Yeah, okay. But basically, the great thing about community gardens is they're mostly organic, not necessarily all the time. Sometimes you just have really bad pests, you need to use a little of, maybe a very mild pesticide or something like that. But the other thing is, they don't take up a whole lot of space, and if you have enough of them in a networked fashion where, for instance, I interviewed a month ago a man named Dan Kenny, who's the executive director of the DeKalb County Community Gardens, and he was saying that the DCCG currently operates over 80 community agriculture programs in the DeKalb County area, which is way more than I thought there were. He's even talking about implementing a 5-acre food forest out in the Sycamore area, which I thought was really cool sounding. But if you have the ability to have a lot of these institutions that can feed people, and like you were saying, reduce the amount of transportation used to get food on people's plates, it'll definitely, if it happens enough places, then you're reducing the need for such large-scale agriculture, and we can start to bring back a lot of that habitat that's been converted to like basically farm deserts, if you will.
Yeah. Alright, so my other benefit to vertical farms was that, as humans, we want to play God. You know, we want to be the creators of our reality, and that is plain to see through the way that we are manipulating the environment to grow these monoculture crops that are totally against nature. Like that would never happen in nature. Never, and we pay the price for that. But when it comes to vertical farming, you're not really using soil that needs the bacteria that's within it to create that ultra high yields, And so we can, if we want to play God, I think the place to do that would be in our own, in kind of a lab area, and that is more so of a lab area where we can grow monoculture crops and have it be more efficient and tweak with it that way. And I don't necessarily, I think the word condone, like that type of alterations to everything, but I don't see it not happening, and I think that is the best way for us to do it. Plus, if we grow in that laboratory environment, vertical farms, we don't need to use pesticides because we choose what grows where. We literally can choose what grows where. We don't have to worry about some seed germinating within our thing unless one of the people that are growing there put weed seed on accident somehow, which is probably not going to happen.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Is there any does Stevens Point have like a greenhouse or like what do they call it, a conservatory or anything like that?
We have a couple of greenhouses, and then we've also have a campus garden, a campus nursery, a campus compost garden, and then we're having another indoor greenhouse built onto one of our new science buildings that's opening up. And then we've also got pretty large acre, I think at least a couple hundred acreage forest preserve on the property.
Okay. And then is that Schmeekley?
Yeah, that is Schmeekley Reserve.
Gotcha.
And if I could add a couple of things to like the vertical farming, I think the thing, the targeting the cities first is probably the best and only way vertical farming would take off, because people who farm and live in rural areas already eat food that's grown by their neighbor or by themselves or by their friends themselves, so they're already in the local produce loop. They sell their extra crops at the farmers markets every weekend, so they're probably not like the people that are going to be all into it. Otherwise they'd be like, okay, we don't really want you building a 12-story structure.
Well, I mean, there's just no money in that anyways.
Yeah, and so the city people, they're right now, especially right now, with the large amount of young people in the cities and the popularity of Whole Foods and the vegan restaurants that are coming around and stuff like that, that you're probably going to be able to get funding way easier and probably without any additional construction necessary in like the big city areas. And that's probably just going to be like the extent of the vertical farming, because a lot of the farmers, like, we're still going to need some agriculture, like a pretty healthy amount of agricultural land regardless. And the other stuff, I mean, there are like and like with pesticide use, like we're always going to have to use pesticides regardless,
right, to some degree,
to some degree,
right,
definitely.
Okay.
But like we can turn those old farm fields with just I don't know if Garlon will do it, but depending on whatever you do, spray it down with Garlon, kill the top vegetation, grow soybean and alfalfa for a couple of seasons so that you get the nutrient content back and you get those fine root particles into the soil and like building up aggregates and holding in moisture, and then you can turn that bitch into a red pine plantation. And that's what a lot of people, at least in the Northwoods, have done with their old ag land, and they turn them into tree plantations, and then that kind of goes back into that loop we were talking about, because you can turn those fields and you can just kind of do what you want with it.
Right.
Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that.
And the great thing about that too is that not necessarily to the degree that like an old growth conifer forest would provide, but a red pine plantation is going to provide a hell of a lot more usable habitat for a predator species than a farm field is.
Yeah.
There's, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people don't know this, but predators are one of the biggest ecosystem drivers, which means that they have a huge impact on the way that ecosystems function. Because, so for instance, deer, right? Deer eat plant matter, as do rabbits, as do beavers. You know, they use plant matter for building dams. All these creatures are hunted by predator species like coyotes, wolves, bears, foxes, but particularly the apex predators are the predators that are the big ones, like bears, mountain lions, and wolves. And these species are really important because, things like elk, deer, moose, horses even, any of these big herbivores, yeah, that what'll happen is if you don't have predators in an ecosystem, there's just like the reason why in the United States we have so many outbreaks of deer diseases is because their numbers are huge, like enormous. Wolves used to be all the way basically from coast to coast, and along with American expansion, we've pretty much rooted them out of pretty much everywhere except now they've been reintroduced to Yellowstone.
I mean, not even American expansion. Like, we had government subsidies
For
that
killing them.
you were
Right,
able
right,
to
exactly, yeah.
kill
Oh yeah,
and
there was huge
sell
bounties.
yourself for decent money.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, because if
You
you're
got extra for pups or something like that too.
yeah,
Really?
if you're
Wow.
hunting,
I know about
if you
that.
got an animal that's hunting livestock, you gotta kill that animal, man.
No, not the pups.
But and yeah, so what happens is if you don't have these predators in the ecosystem, then essentially the herbivores will just kind of run rampant, and they'll start eating more of the plant matter than is optimal for the ecosystem. So, for instance, in Yellowstone, moose and elk would be eating a lot of these willow, shrubs and trees that would grow along riverbanks, and the roots of these shrubs and trees would stabilize the banks and stop a lot of erosion and in-cutting from these streams. And without the wolves there, they've only been reintroduced as of the 90s. Without these wolves there, the elk and the deer and the moose, they pretty much ate all of that willow bark out. So not only do you have the streams totally eroding away and cutting in and getting really windy and stuff, you also, beavers don't have the willow to make dams out of, so you have all these wetlands drying up too. It's just like a crazy like ripple effect kind of. I really did love seeing those the red pine forests everywhere when Adela and I went to visit you up at Tomahawk. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely beautiful up there, and most of that land is not farmland, and it's dedicated mostly to the tree farms.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So do you see, like, because you were up there for pretty much a whole summer, do you want to explain a little bit about what you did in your internship?
Well, it was not so much an internship. For our program in the College of Natural Resources, all students that graduate in any of the major natural resource fields, so like wildlife, forestry, soils, fisheries, environmental law enforcement, environmental education, everybody except like the biology and those pesky paper science people. We have to spend 6 weeks in Tomahawk doing a field experience, which covers just like a little bit of all of the majors that was announced. So like you do some forestry, you do like forest measurements, you learn how to timber scale, you do land surveying and stuff like that. You learn how to do like wildlife, like small mammal trapping, and how to do like call response surveys and stuff like that. It's a lot of it's just like measuring populations and learning how to use equipment. But yeah, I essentially spent 12 weeks up in the North Woods and got to check out all the lakes and see all the different types of fish. And there's black spruce bogs in there. There's a ton of loons. I think there's close to 1,000 lakes up there, so it's a pretty amazing like chunk of land.
Yeah.
So would you say that from what you saw, the land that's managed that way, that's kept as forest land, either for, for scientific research or for like timber harvesting and stuff, would you say that, like the overall ecosystem was like healthier than like a traditional agriculture ecosystem?
I would say for the most part, yes, just because you do have such a diverse landscape in that respect. Um, you know, it's kind of hard to beat being able to be in like an open prairie setting, and then a couple miles down the road, you're in, a pretty nicely mixed like conifer, maple like forest. So just the large variety of different little like ecotypes was probably the most important distinguishment. Um, but the overall like way that they went about managing it, everybody up there, they all hunt, they all fish, they're all from a farm background or something to the likes, and they have like a um, more to gain with keeping up their natural resources. Because if they're making money off of timber and off of fishing and off of getting their meat and stuff from hunting bear and deer and stuff like that, turkeys everywhere, you're going to want to maintain that ecosystem to make sure that all of that stuff that's keeping you alive essentially is in tip-top shape. And they put a lot of money into like field research, and they let the school operate in that area and do like the tests that we do up there. We have to type up reports and stuff, and we had people asking for our reports because they were interested in like for example the fish populations. We were measuring the amount of amount of plankton in the water. We were doing mark recapture surveys. We were doing like depth surveys, and we wrote them all up into like a lake report, and we made copies. And we had like at least 6 or 7 different property owners that wanted copies of our findings because they have an active stake in the environment around them.
Right, right. And I think that's a really good point to kind of hammer, which is pretty much everything, um, when it boils down to it, whether it's conservation, whether it's alternative agriculture, whether it's hunting, whether it's recreation, this all ties into how it affects people. Because like bottom line, I mean, we care about the environment for a lot of different reasons, but like the real reason we care about the environment is because it impacts people in some way, whether it's because we feel like we love it on a moral level and like a spiritual level, or because we get economic benefits from it. It all boils down to people. So I think that's interesting that you say that.
But some people care more than others.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And for different, I think the different reasons creates different, like, ways we go about preserving the environment, Like, some people would prefer to fit the most, like, how we grow corn now with it, it's like, right next to each other, you can't walk through it. Like, I mean, that's a bad example, because that's not actually nature, but,
But that's interesting you say that, though, because it's kind of weird, because some people might think, oh, I used to be able to run through the cornfields when I was a kid, it's not natural for it to be so close together. But at the same time, the fact that you can grow so much close together actually does possibly make it need less land for it to be in production. So that's like a double-edged sword
And
kind of deal.
regardless of the spacing, it's still something that the human race as a whole, not just like a couple hundred years ago, but over like our entire existence, has chosen these plants, or at least since we figured out agriculture effectively. Like, we've chosen the stuff, and we chose the stuff that grew a little bit better, and then we chose the stuff from that grew a little bit better than that. And we've taken these things out of nature for at least a couple, tens of thousands of years. So what we're doing is just a more to the point version of what we've done our entire lives.
Yeah.
Like humans, not our personally entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Our existence as human beings.
Well, yeah, because we've always been impacting the environment. I think that, and this is something that we were talking about actually before the podcast started, but the fact that even the idea of untouched wilderness is kind of a weird idea because, I mean, even the national parks, I mean, where those national parks were, there at one point were people living there. I mean, every part of the world's been inhabited by humans for a pretty long time. I mean, modern humans originated, we think, somewhere around 200,000 years ago. I mean, that's a really long time.
Yeah.
If written history only goes back like 6,000 years, that's not, that's not even a tenth of it. So
Yeah.
we've been affecting the environment in ways we probably don't even really understand at all yet.
Well, I mean, look at some of the things that we're still discovering about the ancient world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're finding new weird structures all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
Well, all
Well,
right.
you don't want to hear about it here.
Yeah.
I think another thing to think about is if it wasn't us doing the things that we do, it's not like you said with beaver and with deer and with moose on their own, and they have no even capabilities of rationalizing the impacts that they make on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
They can drastically change ecosystems on their own. If we just had a world full of deer or a world full of cows or whatever, there would be probably drastically less trees and green space around.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, if we would have never came around, maybe something else would have just torn it all to shit in some other different way.
No,
So at least with what we're doing, we're now in this point where we can recognize to an extent whether the people in charge or not are going to do anything, but we can at least point to a problem and have a solution. Whereas if we just let beaver or even emerald ash borer that decimates entire counties worth of trees, this little bug the size of half of your fingernail,
Mm-hmm.
We have a strange way of doing things, sure, but if it wasn't for us and being able to learn about these different things, there may not have already been an environment that was as suitable as it is now.
And
Mhm.
but then you have on the other side of that though, just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Isn't
Sure.
that though still interfering with the natural process? I'm not saying that whatever effects we're having on the climate, obviously may have something to do with the prevalence of emerald ash borers or the pine bark beetle or any of that stuff. But
Yeah.
pest species, that's a natural phenomenon, like locusts and shit. I mean, it does happen in nature. So at the same time, we're still doing it in a way that we think is better as a species. We think it's better to have these trees, but that's because that's the way we feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
but all species make that choice for themselves,
Right.
what they prefer their environment to be.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess it's just that is the nature of the game. It's I don't think the way we're doing it is as important of just at least understanding that what we're doing is not that much different from what everybody else is doing. It's just the route that we're taking is the difference.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I would say, okay. All right. So, for our listening audience, we have a couple of questions we'd like to pose. Hopefully, first of all, you found this interesting. But so, first question is, what are your ideas of ways that we could meet human needs and also try to protect or preserve more land for biodiversity? In addition to things like urban forestry or maybe vertical farming. Are there other ideas that you guys have out there in terms of things that we could maybe implement. Um, and then second thing is not really a question, but this is just a suggestion for anyone who wants to make an impact, whether it's to preserve apex predator species, to improve ecosystems, any of that stuff. Try to buy, when it comes to food, try to buy local. Local is even more important than organic, because organic food can still be grown on a mass industrial scale. It just might mean that they're, not using pesticides, or they're using natural pest management.
Which can be things
and there
like
are natural pesticides that come from plants and stuff that are still under the pesticide category.
Yeah.
That organic farms will use, and like the plant matter that is compromised of it, which is the main active ingredient, so they can still use that and say, hey, we're being organic.
Right, exactly.
100%.
Right. And the other thing about buying local is that, like Luke was saying earlier, it just definitely reduces the need for transportation for food, because generally, like in our normal food system, food is transported so many times, because first, the seed, if it's not sown directly into the ground, it'll be transported from where it's grown and then to be transplanted into the ground as seedlings, or and then you have the transportation from harvest to where it's processed, and then from where it's processed to where it's packaged, and then from where it's packaged to where it's distributed.
Yeah.
So if you buy local food, there's farmers markets, there's community gardens, there's food pantries. Support these kinds of institutions, because they really help make people and the food system a little bit closer together, which just has really good impacts pretty much in all regards.
And that brings me to my question. What are the restraints for you in buying local food? Like, can you buy it in your local grocery store, or do you have to go way out of your way? And is it even possible for you in your location to buy local food?
Okay.
And it never hurts to read,
Yeah, definitely.
The more you understand the way things work and why, the clearer most decisions you have to become.
Yeah, definitely. Well, very nice. I think that's a good note to end on. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Eric, thank you very much for being our very intelligent guest.
Our very intelligent first guest.
You're setting a high bar, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Guest of the year.
That's right, guest of the year. Hey, well, you know what? This is being a guest in an official capacity. Don't feel like a stranger when it's just, Adela and Luke and me.
Definitely.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for doing this. Everybody, hope you enjoyed it, and have a good one.
Yeah, you too.